So I'll get on, move along. So one of the first things that I have heard a lot of people ask and have had conversations with a lot of startups around is, okay, uh, do I even need a co-founder? Is it not enough to be a single founder? And honestly, the answer there is it definitely is not necessary that you have to have a co-founder. Yes, there are a lot of advantages, and I'll talk from my my experience around it. But there are a lot of businesses in the world which have been built as a single founder, but and they have seen great success. Some have been bootstrapped, so they've not had to even take any funding, etc., and have gone to great success. But having a co-founder is more to do with just kind of being wait a second. So a co-founder is more about checks and balances, right? So how do you kind of have somebody else complement you in some way or the other? So there are things like, and I'm speaking about myself specifically, was that I was never confident that I could kind of on my own, and I wanted somebody to be on this journey with me. So therefore, for me, it was very important to have a co-founder. Should I have had more than one co-founder, or should it be two, three? I think this depends on the law of numbers. When you are single founder, you pretty much own the entire company. When you're two founders, you are split 50-50 or some ratio thereon. When you are three, it comes down to 33% each. So it's not just about how much ownership you have of the company, but it's also about how do you operate. The more number of leaders that you have at an equal stance, it becomes more difficult to kind of do decisions. So the best is two to three. Four has worked well in some organizations that I have been involved with as well. But more than that, you really want to kind of question whether it is founders that are there, or are they kind of employees that you want with a significant equity stake. It also depends on what is your chemistry with the other people, right? So being founders is very close to being a marriage, right? So you have to kind of come together and make something work. And so the chemistry between the two people is very important on how you will kind of run a company. uh, the other question that gets often asked is, if I am a single founder, will I be unattractive when it comes to investments or something of that sort? Um, let's look at it from an investor's perspective for a moment. When an investor is evaluating a business, there are multiple things that they look at. Yes, the founding team is a very important element of it, right? So how many people are really kind of equipped, or are the two founders, three founders, four founders good enough good enough to kind of solve the problem or not? Do they have within them the expertise? If it is one founder who has deep experience in the domain that they are solving for, or they are going to kind of build the company in, that may be enough. But they also look at, okay, I am placing the entire bet on one person. If that one person loses steam or kind of loses motivation, will it put my entire investment or the company at risk? So what are the other things that we can do, right? So hence, having two or three people who are at the helm of a company makes it easier for them to take that decision. Now, that is not the only criteria. As I said, they will look at what the problem statement is. They will look at what is the size of the market. They will look at what the operating model is. So there are a lot of other factors that go in. A single founder necessarily does not mean that you will be unattractive. But yes, having more than one founder kind of helps in the investment process. That definitely is there. So what are the pros of having a co-founder? Like, why should you have one? And in fact, I would say that it's better actually to have no co-founder than to have a wrong co-founder. And the co-founder that you kind of bring on board, whether it is one or two, it is about what are the gaps in you that somebody else can fill? Like, do they think differently than how you think? Can they do the things that you can't do? Like, for example, while I have an engineering background, I have not written code from almost 2006, right? And moved on to non-tech roles. So for me, it was very important to have someone which has a little more tech grounding, because I may not be the right person to have those kinds of conversations that my co-founder, say, Rishi, could have. Similarly, I have spent a lot of my time in customer-facing roles, post my MBA. So for Rishi, it was important to have me, because I was then able to kind of take ownership of sales and marketing and operations. He focused on the product and the people aspects of our companies, right? So we have to ensure that the two co-founders or the founding team is having specific items that they are kind of owning. And we do need to have the ability to learn from each other. Like, if I am capable and I know exactly the same things that my co-founder does, then I'm not learning, I'm not growing. And that is part of this journey as well, right? So needed someone who is really operates differently than me, thinks differently than me, as well as can do things which are different than what I can do. That is on the practical or the gaps side. The other is being a founder is a very lonely journey, and you even your family and others may not be able to really kind of appreciate or empathize with the journey that you're being through. And somebody who is in the same shoes as you is probably the best person that you can actually lean on. There will be hard times. We've been in the business for about 2 years, and we've had our share of ups and downs throughout. So hey, there is somebody who you can kind of lean on emotionally, who you can share responsibility with, and being a single founder sometimes also makes you a little arrogant, and ego brings out ego. So who's that one person who can stand in front of you and kind of keep your ego in check? So that is the person that you want to look for as a co-founder, right? So and for me personally, that has been great, and I think Rishi would kind of echo the same, that for us, being able to kind of tag team, being able to kind of wear different hats, being able to be there for each other, has been the reason why we are where we are. Otherwise, we would not have had the success. So what should I look for in a co-founder, right? So what are things that you want to kind of look at? And as I said earlier, chemistry matters, and map map it with these skills as well. So there is, what is their expertise? What are your expertise and what is their expertise? How does that bring together something that can run the company? I prefer somebody of my similar age, or when I had thought about starting a company, I definitely wanted somebody who was my age as well. The reasons are just being able to relate to that person, being able to understand where they are in life, what their experiences have been similar to mine, at least in terms of maturity, like that. So I wanted somebody who's at the same pedestal in life as I was. This is tricky, sometimes you might want somebody who is either much older than you or much younger than you, depending on the business you are getting into. But I prefer, or I would advise, having founders at the same age, because then you kind of, the energy levels, the chemistry kind of becomes better. It isn't to say that there aren't exceptions, and founders which have a little bit of an age gap cannot work together well. That's not the case. It's just that I feel that having people of the same age makes it easier for you to operate with them. Do they have the relevant skills to kind of work with you? You might be going into, for example, a deep tech space, or you might be going into a consumer space. So do they have the expertise to help you there? Like, for example, you want to enter the consumer space, and your co-founder marketing chops when it comes to enterprise. They have the expertise when it comes to marketing, but do they have the relevant expertise in the domain that you're going after? And kind of can that skill really be transferred, or is that something that you will have to build upon with other people, right? So where are they really helping you? And I find this very important, is what is their working style? Because you want to be able to kind of accept that yes, they operate in a certain way, you operate in a certain way, and there is some, there will never be you will never be an inline, but there is an acceptance that yes, one person is perhaps quick in making decisions, the other person thinks through things, and both are important in different situations. So how do you kind of make sure that you are compatible with their working style, or at least accepting of their working style, is important for a co-founding relationship to happen. Another one, which I get often asked is, when should I bring a co-founder? And for me, the ideal is that you kind of bring a co-founder as early as you can, because that allows them to be part of the ideation journey, allows them to kind of define the problem statement, define the market, and etc. And also then they can set the vision with you. And in my view, that makes them more invested inside, what the success of the company looks like, or where they want the company to go with you. So bringing co-founders early on, in my view, is a much better thing to do. And also it kind of brings in skin in the game earlier, that they are more invested, they are more motivated to kind of take the company somewhere. Can you bring in co-founders at a later point in time, maybe after you have taken investment? Of course, you can. And I have seen cases that has happened. People have even graduated their employees to co-founder status at a later point in time as well. So yes, it is possible, and it is definitely examples out there when this is done. The only thing that I would want, as co-founders, to be cautious about is that what is really bringing them in? Is it really the vision, or is it the fact that you now have investment and have the capital, and hence their job is secure, is why they are coming in? So it's tricky to kind of judge that. One of the ways could be that you have them work with you of time where the equity is not in the question, first understanding whether you are really getting value out of them towards the business, and then kind of think of what the equity status could be, etc. But yeah, it is possible to bring somebody at a point in time. And yes, you may have to take the approval of the board for it. There will be a lot more kind of diligence around it, but it is possible to do it at a later point in time. At the same time, I would also ask you to question yourself that, do I really need a co-founder at that time? Or should I bring in somebody who is a VP or a executive in the company and has a percentage share? So not really give them co-founder status, but give them something which is really meaty, which kind of drives them, but helps them grow in the company while you are also growing your business. Finally, before I take a break and kind of address a few questions, there is this hard conversation that founders really need to have, right? Who owns what? What is their role in the company going to be? What does it mean for the company, and what does it mean for the equity? Equity is the most costly asset that a company has. So obviously, everybody is a little careful about how much equity do they give away. And so I also feel that if you are bringing in a co-founder and they are not at an almost equal pedestal with you, then the relationship will be skewed. And I'll give you an example here. One of my friends, in fact, was in a conversation with somebody else, to get into the co-founder role, and that person had already raised money. When he approached my friend, he said that I'll probably give you, equity which was in the low single digits, and you will help drive the company with me, or build define the problem statement with me. Now that's a very skewed arrangement. Like, because of somebody being in the position of power, they are trying to kind of take advantage of somebody else. And if I were, and then my friend declined, and if I were in his shoes, I would have declined too, because if I am wanting to be a co-founder, I want to be able to do something and be able to kind of be rewarded well, right? a co-founder or a founder, the journey is anywhere between 7 to 10 years before you see anything, which is material. So if I have to commit myself to that kind of a journey, then I need to make sure that I am compensated enough for it, right? So there is always going to be this conversation that you need to have with your with your co-founders, and there will always be one boss, right? So there will always be one CEO. Even they're the CEO is, as we say, the first among equals, right? So the CEO will, you have to decide who will be the CEO, who will be the one that will kind of have that pedestal, and everybody else from a org structure point of view reports into that person. And it is important to have agreement in place. If a formal founders agreement can be done, that's the best. Typically, one of the things, and that's something that we did as well, was we had a vesting period for our equity as well. Typically, and you should do it. I would advise that standard 4-year vesting period with a 1-year cliff, and then percentage of shares vesting thereafter is pretty standard. It is pretty well accepted by investors as well, and that's the best way to ensure that whoever is coming in is at least invested for a certain amount of time, as in the journey of the company. So I'll take a pause here. I've talked about a few things when it comes to founders and equity, and how to kind of think about co-founders. I'll take a pause here. Shreya, any questions that I can answer at this point of time?
Yeah, sure. So the first question is from Pranav Kumar. I am an aspiring entrepreneur and in ideation stage. What factors should I count in to exactly find how much equity or profit sharing should be done with my co-founders?
So there is no formula to this, unfortunately. It does come down to, for example, some of the things that you could think about is that there is going to be an initial working capital that you're going to put together. How much is being coming from one person versus how much is coming from the other. For the problem statement that you are solving for, who has more expertise, that person will be indexed higher, even though they might be bringing less in terms of cash to the table. So I think it's a mix of what is the skill that they bring in, what is the cash that they bring in, what is their experience that they bring in, and that you have to kind of decide. There is no magic formula, unfortunately, but put yourself in their shoes and also ask that, what will it really make worthwhile for me to be able to be part of this company, right? So is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 30%? Does it have to be 50-50%, right? So there isn't a magic formula, but yes, as I said, their skill, their experience, their what is their kind of relevance to the problem that you're solving, and in potential some cases the cash that they bring in, all of them together is what decides how much equity should be parted with.
Yeah, thank you, Samit. So the next question is, how do you decide who sits on the board? How do you decide who gets the CEO role?
That's a hard one, right? And so here's the deal, right? At the end of the day, the buck stops with one person, and that person will be the CEO, right? So in our case, for example, between Rishi and I, Rishi is the CEO. I am the the COO, and there were a few reasons for that. One is Rishi had done a company before, and he had been an entrepreneur before, whereas I was this was my first time that I was being an entrepreneur. So for me, it was very natural to kind of look at him in the CEO role, because I knew that as I am kind of going in this journey, there will be a lot that I will be learning from him, right? So that is there. Second is who has a better leadership qualities, right? Who is the more people person? When you look at any founder, and I talk about this later also, is being a founder is not about doing things as much as it is about getting things done. So who is that leader among the two of you? And this is a hard thing. We find it very hard to let go of our own ego and let somebody else kind of take that role, it will be. But it is a journey of, self discovery, that will I be the right person to lead company? It's not about me, it is about the company. Who is the right person for the company, for, from an investment point of view, from a face point of view, from a leadership point of view, who is really that best person? And that is the person that should be the CEO. There is no, objective criteria that I can kind of list down. It will always be what is in the best interest of the company.
Okay. Yeah, so the next question is, please elaborate on things that should be taken care of in founders agreement.
Okay. So there are a few founders agreement that you will find online, and you will find it on RevSales' portal as well, our website as well. So a few things that you kind of are important are, A, what is the ratio of the founders, equity going to be? B, what is the vesting period going to be? C, what happens if somebody exits early? What happens to the options that they are leaving behind? Will it go into the option pool? Will it, go into, will be handed over to the other person or not? What are the conditions under which, that exit is acceptable, not acceptable? What are the roles, and what are you holding the other person responsible and accountable for delivering in the company? So how do you kind of measure what will the, what the role they will be playing, and how will be kind of measuring that? So, right. So those are a few of the things that are important to have in a founders agreement.
Okay. Can we take some more?
Yeah, sure. I think a couple more.
Okay. So, okay, Saurabh says he's launching a tech app where he has the domain expertise and has partnered with a couple of known friends to be partners and build the app. They are from tech background and he's not. Question is, they have parallel jobs as well as Saurabh, and he intends to give them up to 15%, hold hold 85%, with an understanding that the investor will take equity out of his share of 85%. Would this be a prudent way forward? Is it recommended to only give them a small one-time equity and look for alternate co-founders?
Okay, I'll park this question. I think this is a very specific use case, but I have some guidance around it a little later in the presentation.
Sure.
And I would like to kind of present an alternative there, rather than giving equity upfront. As I said, as a founder, you should be really, really paranoid about equity, who you are giving it to and for what. So be really, really kind of hard on yourself, as if you are parting a piece of yourself when it comes to equity, and really, really take a judgment call on that. But I have some guidance a little ahead, which may help you in understanding how that can play out.
Sure. So Fahad asks, we need to work for some time before getting to as co-founder, officially, to understand each other. How can we manage till then? As will there be some certainty between the founders? So he's asking at what point.
Yeah, a great question. And this is very important, that if you have are having somebody come on as co-founder, and somebody who you know or have worked with before, I think that makes it easier. And the other thing that I said, having in the founders agreement the vesting clause, where there is the 25% vests only after 1 year, and the remaining 75% kind of vest over the remainder of 3 years. That kind of gives you that 1 year of window in which neither you nor the other person actually owns anything, but there is promise of 25% vesting at the end of 1 year, right? So that gives you time to kind of really build a working relationship with the other person, because if they don't meet your your benchmark, or you don't meet their benchmark, or your working style does not match, or there is disagreement, that 1 year at least kind of gives you some window of opportunity to work around that, right? So never vest all your shares to all co-founders at the same time, at the start of the company. In fact, investors also will want you to kind of vest it over a period of time because they want to see skin in the game as well. So that's my advice. A, best is to have some working relationship with the person before, if you can. And B, use the 1 year that the cliff that for equity that is there for vesting period to build that relationship with that person and really understand whether that person is the right person to be a co-founder, or do you need to bring in somebody else.
Okay. So one more is, can you please explain the board of a startup, role and legal wise?
A board of a startup. So typically, again, if you are co-founders who are having near equal or equal split as far as equity is concerned, at least that was the way that we were both members of the board, right? Because we had both equal stake in the company, so to say. Depending on when an investor is coming in, depending on how much money they are putting in and whether they want a board seat or not, that is something that you might want to kind of add in as well. Typically, it is best to have an odd number of board members, and for natural reasons that you don't want a deadlock when it comes to critical situations or critical decisions, right? So always have a odd number. So it could be that the 2 or 3 founders, if it's 2 founders, have a third independent board member who doesn't have any stake in the company, but is a board member as an independent board member and who can be replaced at the appropriate time. Or if you're 3, then, so keep it odd, keep an odd number of board members is how I would recommend. And I think legally also this kind of holds. There are a lawyer would probably advise you better than I would here, but having an odd number of members in the board is the sensible thing to do.
Okay.
Cool. Shreya, should I continue,
Sure.
or you have other questions?
I think we can take this in the next set.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So let's move on from the founders to kind of creating the core team, and there will be a journey when it comes to what kind of people you will hire over a period of time. Now, first of all, always be in the hiring mode. Always look out for good talent. And this is something that I am very bad at, but you have to always be in the hiring mode. Second thing, especially when you are an early startup, hire for attitude over skill, right? So attitude matters more than anything else. You should be able to kind of give somebody a problem statement and they will go and kind of figure it out and get you some answers, right? So always kind of hire for attitude more than you can for skill. And I had the good fortune of listening to Sudhish Nair, who's the CEO of ThoughtSpot, about a year back at one of the talks that he gave. And he talks about these 3 kind of phases where you have misfits, builders, and scalers, right? So your first set of people will be misfits, and they will kind of do all things wrong, but they will bring the company together, right? And once you start kind of getting into some shape is then when you start hiring builders, people with specific expertise that you want to kind of go in a certain direction or not. And finally, you kind of bring in scalers who will take a problem or take a setup and then scale it 10x or 100x, right? So there will always be this journey. You will start with misfits, graduate to builders, and then graduate to scalers. Expecting someone to kind of, evolve from a misfit to a builder to a scaler is hard. Very few people are able, and you will see that there will be kind of churn that will happen in the organization, and that's okay. And people who can actually translate from misfits to builders to scalers are your most important asset, right? So because they are able to transform and grow with the company. Very few of them, as I said, but there are people like that. When we started the company, and we had, we are a B2B company, and for us, user experience was very, very critical. So our hire was not an engineer, but a product designer, because first we wanted to iterate on, okay, if we want to solve this problem, what is it really going to be from an experience perspective, and then design the tech around it rather than the other way around, right? So that was our thesis. If you are in enterprise software solution space, you might want somebody who has more deep expertise in integrations and platform building, because to kind of succeed in that environment, you need those kind of hooks and hooks and technologies in place. If you are going into a consumer app, for example, you might want to find people who are good with mobile development. So when we started the company, we had one product designer, two backend engineers who were senior, one front-end engineer, and one marketer, right? And that was what formed the core team when we started off. We have grown over that period. Like as Shreya mentioned earlier, we were 2 people in 2018 and we are 50 people in 2020. So that's how the company has grown over the last 2 years. But yes, the initial set of people were all people that we really wanted to kind of experiment with, lots of prototypes. We brought in a few short-term consultants as well for projects like help us in digital marketing or help us in building a plugin, things like that. But kept iterating with the core team. And a lot of people also think about it, okay, should I bring in salespeople early on, right? And I would advise against that. I would say that if you are the co-founder, you are the best salesperson that the company will ever have. Unless and until you have closed a sale, you have been in front of the customer and converted a conversation, do not hire a salesperson till that time. Because if you aren't able to do it, somebody else won't be able to do it. Yes, you can say that I'm not a salesperson, but even then, till you have made your first sale, expecting somebody else to kind of make the sale for you is going to be hard. Yes, if you decide that no, you can't sell, and you bring in early on somebody at as a co-founder who is good at selling, who's good at being good at working with customers, that's fine, because it's still a founder which is selling. When I say salespeople, I mean to say that hiring that second or the third layer of sales till the founders have sold the solution once themselves is harder to do. And yes, I am talking more in the context of a B2B software company, less in a context of a consumer company, because there the sales business model is slightly different. But in the B2B world, for sure, till you have sold yourself, don't hire salespeople. So that is what I would kind of recommend here. Another thing, how do you kind of incentivize? So how many stock options should you give? How should you kind of structure it? There are nuances to this. One is, first of all, be very clear that any employee that is coming into the company is not coming with the same motivation that you as a founder have, right? So to expect them to kind of work equally hard, to expect them to kind of take the same amount of ownership is unreasonable. They will be driven. They will be kind of, work for the company, but just by the nature of who you are and who they are, the motivation levels are going to be different. Now, they, yes, need to be rewarded, correct. Like, for example, for our senior folks who came at a pay cut to our company and who are critical to us, we compensated them early on with a good mix of stock options to kind of make it worthwhile for them to leave what they were doing and come and build, wealth with us, right? So there is a wealth building opportunity that we are giving them. There were people who joined us, only on cash. There was no stock options given to them. But after 6 months, 9 months, 1 month, 1 year, we kind of, depending on their performance, roll out ESOPs to them. So we kept a pool aside, from the company, and that is what we are currently using to offer ESOPs to people. Some come with ESOPs early on, especially senior folks, because they're leaving something else to kind of come. For the more younger folks or inexperienced folks, we base it on performance, and after a 6-month or a 1-year period, depending on how they have performed, out ESOPs to them. We haven't rolled out ESOPs to everyone. And that's a fact that not everybody has gotten ESOPs. It depends on how critical the role of is to the company. What is the performance of the individual? What is their growth been? A lot of factors kind of come in play to when you are releasing stock options to any employee. But yes, to people who came in early, they did get a good chunk to kind of keep them motivated. Uh, Not everybody needs to be an employee, right? And this goes back to what Fayad's question was around. Was it Fayad, if I'm right, who said that I have people outside who have their day jobs and are helping me from a perspective is, and we use this very well. Is we had advisors in areas that we were weak at. We brought in advisors to advise us on how to get things done. Typically, the industry rule when it comes to advisors is they give you give them anywhere between 0.1 to 0.25% of equity, which vests over 2 years, right? So there may be a cash component as well for expenses, but what they bring in is specific domain expertise. They may open some doors for you. They may guide you on how to get things done. They can be great mentors. Like you can use, especially if you're a single founder, you can use advisors and angel investors as that guiding light or that person who keeps you in check, because they are invested in your success equally, right? So advisors are a great way to kind of navigate the journey. Like we brought in advisors, some on the tech side, some on the GTM side, some on the sales side, some on the domain side, right? So kind of not taking all the burden on ourselves, but having advisors to kind of fill in some of these roles for the short term and then kind of go from there. Angel investors are similar. The added advantage is that they will bring in some money, right? So, and they will take a percentage of equity for that. Now, again, the law of numbers kicks in here. If you are a single founder, or let's take a single founder case, and if you give an angel or an advisor a big chunk of what your kind of equity is, any dilution that is happening to you, right? So your chunk keeps getting reduced and reduced, right? So that really the best method. Angels typically, and I'm saying typically, there will always be exceptions, typically come in single digit when it comes to equity issuance. So just be careful about how much equity is being promised to an angel. Low works really well because it leaves you enough room for a stock option pool. It leaves you enough room to bring in more angels, to bring in more advisors, etc. So make sure that you are structuring it so that it gives you room to experiment later on and not giving away too much to just one person. So angels and advisors are a great way to kind of augment your leadership or domain expertise, experience into the team. And they are great when it comes to kind of raising investment, because you can use them as sounding boards. You can use them as people who know investors and kind of can open doors for you. At the other end of the spectrum are interns. When you are early on, you're doing a lot of experiments. You're trying out a lot of things. Best is to kind of hire in as well, to kind of achieve short-term assignments, 2-3 months, kind of do an experiment, see whether it works or not. Is that something you really want to invest in more, and then bring an employee for that particular person, a particular purpose? That in turn can translate into an employee as well. So it's a kind of a low risk, low cost method for you to evaluate a direction and see whether you can kind of bring that person on board or not, or do you really need to flesh out that function or that experiment more? So interns can work very well in that regard. Another thing, and probably this is the last before my closing notes, is that what you reward in your team becomes the culture of the company, right? So, and you have to, as founders, always focus on building the culture. So you will have to kind of communicate not once, not twice, but multiple times, right? So communication, which is honest, which is straightforward, especially with your core team, will go a long way, because they don't want to just hear, do this. They also we want to be part of, okay, why are we doing this? What is the thought process behind them? Have you taken their inputs to kind of set the direction of the company or go in a certain direction, right? So communication becomes probably one of the most important factors. And even at Rev Sales, we take it very seriously that we try to kind of communicate with people as much as we can. If somebody looks at our chat, it's a constant feed of updates that keeps happening one way or the other, right? So we live and breathe this principle ourselves. And as founders, your team is your most important leverage, right? So you can switch gears and go after a different problem statement, but building an entirely new team becomes much harder. Changing the path is easier, changing the team is harder, right? Because you develop a certain way of working, you have a certain faith. So that is something that you want to kind of build upon. And iterate. There's a lot of iteration that you will have early on. You will have to be able to throw away a lot of code. You will have to be able to kind of retrace your steps. And this goes back to what I said earlier: hire for attitude. If people are afraid of experimenting or being able to backtrack, take a zoom out, look at the situation, then go back in, it will be harder for you to operate. And uh, as I said, what you reward becomes the culture. So if you don't reward failures, or if you don't celebrate failures or the learnings or the iterations, uh, your team will not take risks. Your team will not push the envelope. They will not go beyond what you want them to go, right? So be able to kind of celebrate successes and failures equally well. It also pays to have a good operating kind of a framework. I'll share what the operating framework at Rev Sales is. We have 4 principles: rigor, ritual, relentless, and relax. Right. So rigor is essentially about how kind of how deep we go into something, and how kind of attention to detail we give to doing any task. Rigor is like, are we continuously kind of doing it? So relentless is uh, we don't want to leave anything else, right? So we want to make sure that we are not letting off anything go. We want to take it to a certain level and then say that, yes, I have tried out all possibilities. This is working, this is not working. This is the path that I will take. Ritual is that there are some things that we just do, every day in the morning. Everybody will say that, okay, what is their plan for the day? Every Monday morning, everybody will say that what is their plan for the week. Every 2 weeks, we will have a demo hour for everybody to know what is happening in the team or in the company. Unfortunately, with the lockdown, it is not happening. But every few months, we will have a outing for the team, so that we can just let our hair down, right? So things like that. So there are certain rituals that we always have. When we were in office, every day 3 o'clock used to be tea time. Just kind of bunch of people coming together, a bit of banter. So things went going on. And then the final one, relax, is everybody needs downtime. So make sure that the downtime is being given to them. So that's how you kind of build the company culture and work with your early core team as you build it out. So I'll pause. Shreya, any more questions that I can take at this point of time before I wrap it up?
Sure. So one of the question is, can a board terminate a CEO or a main founder, as happened in a few earlier cases?
See, the board is a entity of decision-making entity of the company. Can they terminate? I hope it doesn't come to them, but yes, the board is taking whatever is in the best interest of is taking a decision in the best interest of a company, and that is why it is important to ensure that you use your board as partners and not look at them as somebody who's on the opposite side of the table with you. Right? So if you work with your board well, you communicate with them, there is transparency, and the board will help you take the right decisions, whatever. So it is an extreme case when it comes to that, the board firing somebody from an executive leadership position or from a they can't take away your equity. They can only take away, the title that you have. So that does happen. We have seen those happen in the past. I think, if I remember, Steve Jobs himself was an example of this case, right? So when he was asked to leave the company from Apple. So does this happen? Yes, it does.
Okay. So the next question is, when you're hiring, how do you check for work ethics, ability to take ownership and execution? During interviews, people can talk, but eventually you find out that they don't translate to action. How do you go
Yeah.
about this?
Yeah. And then great question. And which is why, uh, if you can, and I said that earlier also, is your early core team members should definitely be people that you either know directly or through one level of separation, because that way there is some reference, there is some check that you have on whether they will be committed to what you are kind of signing up for or not. The other thing, and this will sound brutal, but hire fast, fire faster. If you do not have the luxury of sitting on somebody's glory, so if you are not seeing the result from them person, you are well within your rights to kind of have the hard conversation with them, give them the opportunity to pick the pace up. Otherwise, the more you keep that person, that can actually lead to a lot more toxic culture within the company, and kind of can spread to others as well. What you reward is the culture, right? As I said earlier. So if you are rewarding somebody in the company for being lazy, for not picking up the pace, for not delivering on what they are expected to be, then you are being unfair to everybody else who is actually delivering on their expectations, right? So hire fast, but fire faster if that person is not up to the standards or the culture of the company.
Okay. So Jerin is asking, I know the skills that I am looking for in my co-founder, but how do you go about recruiting for a co-founder? And also, what was the process that you went through to get your current co-founder?
So Rishi and I, as co-founders, we met in 2015, and we started the company in 2018. But when we met, Rishi, I was at Freshworks, heading product of Freshdesk, and Rishi's company was being acquired, right? So we were actually on the opposite side of the table of sorts, because his product was being integrated into my product and the acquisition was happening. Uh, we built a relationship over 3 years, right? I left the company in 2016, late 2016, and he left Freshworks somewhere in the middle of 2017. We kept in touch, we kept exchanging ideas, uh, used our experiences. We used to meet, even before we started kind of thinking about what problem we are going to solve for. We used to meet often, we used to exchange notes, and Shreya knows this, that when Rishi was, had taken a break from his previous role and was mentoring at NSR Cell, I used to also kind of join Rishi and kind of provide guidance to marketing or on sales to the startups that were there, right? So that ways we built over time an understanding of what his and my strengths were. We built an understanding of what we could kind of come together and solve for. And it took a lot of time. So from, I think, October of 2017 till about February of 2019 or 2018 is when we were in this process of trying to kind of get a sense of whether he and I could work together, whether the problem statement that we are going after is the right one, whether we are both financially equipped to kind of go after the problem statement for at least, we knew that we will not be taking a salary for at least 2.5 years. So are we kind of in that position or not? So a lot of those factors went in to kind of when we were coming together. But to answer your specific question, there are forums, like AngelList, etc., which do kind of offer, where you can kind of list your requirement and people will kind of come on board. But yes, there is no shortcut to building a relationship with a potential co-founder and then, kind of figuring out whether they will be the right one for you or not. And it's as much as dating before marriage as anything else. Doesn't mean that arranged marriages don't work. Mine is an arranged marriage, but people today's world definitely prefers dating over that.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the next question is from Raja. So he is asking, I'm on the verge of expansion, offering franchisee to people from all over the country and beyond. How do I ensure people who pick my franchise at remote locations are as passionate about zero waste as I am? Zero waste is his company. Further, how will I be rest assured all members at those outlets wear zero waste as their skin? So basically, how will they follow the values?
There is no way of knowing that. Hard on. It's probably not the answer that you were looking for, but you really cannot kind of confirm or be 100% sure of that somebody else will have the same passion or the same ethics as you do. Yes, what you can do is put checks and balances in your agreement with them that these are and we can talk about separately about your specific industry, but this is what my expectations of you are. These are how I will measure these, and if you kind of fall short of the penalties or what the penalties would be around it. So to expect that emotionally the franchisee will be equally passionate about your product and your way of working is I don't think you can have that expectation. So it's unreasonable. But yeah, you can definitely put checks and balances for what you want them to do and measure them accordingly.
Sure. Samir, we have 20 more open questions. You want to move to the next slide?
Okay, so let me just kind of do closing notes, and then I'll probably we'll take more questions. But
sure.
So largely, just want to kind of leave everyone with these parting thoughts. Is one, I said this earlier, being a founder is not about doing things, it is about getting things done, right? So 50 to 60% of your time will be spent hiring. In fact, somebody will say 70% of your time will be spent hiring. And what your role is to ask, not answer, but ask the right questions, and somebody else should be finding the answers to those questions. So if you are that person, then you should kind of think about, okay, I can do this, or do you need somebody else along with you to kind of fill in this role? Your co-founder should make you better, and this is something that I'm very fortunate to have Rishi as a co, where I constantly learn from him every day. And whether it is people management, whether it is leadership, whether it is communication, I myself have years of experience, but there is never a day when I'm not learning from him as well. So if you are not learning from your co-founder, if that person is not making you better, they are not the right co-founder as such. You have to trust your team, give them the benefit of doubt, and communicate with them, celebrate them, their achievements, their milestones, reward them. You should be rewarding and celebrating your team more than yourself at any point in time, right? So your team is is the kind of currency that you have that will take you anywhere. So invest in your team and invest in the people, grow them as well. And founders have to hustle. You have to iterate, you have to hustle. No matter what anybody says, I would still say that it takes at least 18 to 24 months before you will get to product market fit. And you have to surround yourself with people who are going to kind of stick around with you and be with you for that 18 to 24 months before you see any good measure of success, right? So it's a journey, and you have to have the right people around with you for that. That's it from me. Shreya, I'll stop sharing and we can probably take more questions.
Sure. So Sandeep is asking approximately how much equity pool is generally earmarked for ESOPs?
Varies, but anywhere between 10 to 18% is what we have seen, depending on companies, depending on investors, etc. Anywhere between 10 to 18% is good, and also it depends on how much kind of investment you are bringing in. Uh, we started off, I think, somewhere around 15 to 16%, and as kind of with the second round of funding, that num the shares kind of remain the same, but the percentage obviously decreased. But yeah, anywhere between 10 to 18% is good.
Yeah. What would be the difference between being an advisor and a board member?
Advisors don't have board seats. Yeah, you can appoint one of your advisors as an independent board member, so that you give them a vote, to help you kind of have someone in your court, especially if the board is ending up to being an even number of people. Then having an independent, having an advisor take on that role because they are batting for you helps. But advisor is more about, I'll take an example here is, when we started off, we were entering the Salesforce ecosystem, right? And we weren't very well aware of the Salesforce ecosystem. So what we actually did was we brought in an advisor to help us navigate that, understand the challenges that we will face when it comes to Salesforce, when it comes to kind of building a product on the Salesforce, platform, etc. So right, so they were helping with a specific problem. They were not helping with the overall direction of the company, which is what the board will essentially do. That what market to go after, what customer segment to go after, what senior leadership that you need. So board has a lot broader kind of a role than an advisor. Advisor usually comes in for a very specific targeted reason.
Okay. Um, so the next question is from Harshala. How should a single founder navigate the initial stages of bringing the startup to product market fit, or making it investment ready where hiring becomes easier?
It never becomes easier. Uh, I think it's always hustle, right? So the only thing that you have to be mindful of and keep an eye out is that you should be ready for iterations, very quick iterations, and being able to switch paths quickly. One of the important traits of a founder, and this is constantly drilled into me by Rishi, is uh, ability to look at a problem statement from the 50 feet and the 50,000 feet as well, right? So, and you will have to constantly do context switching. You will be solving a sales problem one day and you will be solving an engineering problem the other day, right? So being able to constantly switch pretty much by the hour, and being able to zoom in and zoom out, okay, what is really needed at the grassroots level versus what is needed at the 50,000 feet level. That is what allows a founder to really navigate fast and move fast and get to product market fit faster. If you are too rigid, too set in the way you are doing things, you might lose the path, right? So that is what my guidance is, that you have to be flexible. You have to be, also you have to be that you are not always right. Have to be a set of people around you who can kind of correct you, and you have to have faith in them to kind of do that. So that is how you kind of get to product market fit. There is no other way.
Okay. So the next question is, so our investor has invested 75% in business against 50% equity in the business. Is it advisable that the founder draw salary as he's completely vested into the business and he's a full-time employee?
Uh, Good question. And this is about whether um, whether you should be drawing salary when you are a founder or not. I think uh, there is going to be a time, and this has happened with both Rishi and I as well, is that there was, for a time, we did not take any, even though we had investment in the company, we did not take a salary. It was on paper, etc., that is there, but we did not draw the salary because we wanted to ensure that that cash is available to the company to use at any point in time. As the team grew, as we brought in more investment also, we did start taking a small salary, but that was largely to ensure that salary does not become a sticker point. Like at the end of the day, all of us have expenses, all of us have a life, all of us have, people that we are responsible for as well, right? So whatever you think is minimum, that takes that irritant away from your head, that yes, I can kind of, with this amount of salary, I can get some of these things done, some of these things taken care of, I don't have to think about it, is okay. And if I'm right, any investor that has a good investor, if you have, they will also agree to this sentiment that what you are drawing is necessary and sufficient and not exorbitant. It should be okay, right? So and again, each startup is unique in that ways, because there are some people who come, who have built some pool over a period of time, and they know that yes, for the next 2 to 3 years they can kind of survive off that pool while they're bringing people, bringing the company to product market, or more kind of from bring in investors as well. So yes, every situation is unique, but necessary and sufficient salary, a good investor will never say no to.
Okay. So the next question is, how do you compensate a mentor or an advisor at early stage, and what should be their runway with early stage ed tech startup? So basically, what is the compensation that you give?
Yeah. So advisors, as I said, can be paid in equity, and typically the runway is about 2 years. So you vest, if you say, for example, if you're giving them 0.2% equity, and it vests over a 24-month period with some portion vesting monthly, so that it is not that everything goes to them immediately. You have to set certain milestones with them, you have to set certain expectations with them, and say that over a 2-year period, this is what I am asking of you. It could be also very specific that okay, I expect 3 to 4 hours of your time every month, every week, whatever that kind of expectation you're setting. Equity values will change accordingly, and you will be with me for 2 years, and if you break in between, whatever has vested till that amount of time is what you get. Otherwise everything goes back into the pool, right? Some people, especially if you are expecting them to travel for you, like they're in a different city and you want them to kind of have close contact with your team, you might want to compensate them on their travel expenses and stay expenses, or maybe give a very small token amount as a retainer to them as well, right? So there are various different models here, but largely it is 2-year period, some amount of equity, and some amount of compensation to manage their expenses going back and forth.
Okay. So so Bhavesh is asking, can you share some insight about firing a person smoothly?
It's always hard, and it takes a toll on both the hiring manager, firing manager, and the leaders as well. But I think the smoothest way to do it is lay it out for them what your expectations are from them. Give them time to kind of turn things around, whether it is a 2-month period, 3-month period, or whatever you think is reasonable, and measure them. And if they don't kind of meet that expectation, then it becomes easier, right? That you've had the conversation, you've set the expectations, you've agreed upon them on the deliverables, and if they still don't come, then it is it is a no-brainer that the relationship is not working out, right? So that's the easiest way to do it. But even then, I know we've been through this as well. It is always emotionally hard, especially when you've invested in a good person, you feel that they can be really valuable to your company. Letting a person go like that is not easy. It's not easy.
Okay. So Suhas is asking, apart from monetary incentives, what other tactics can we use to attract a good talent? Any practical tips will be helpful.
See, when it comes to currency, or when it comes to kind of material, it will be a mix of cash and ESOP only, right? That you will give to the person to come along and work with you. Now, if you look at the other things, it would be what ownership you're giving them in terms of role and responsibility, what growth path you're showing them to kind of, okay, where you are today. This is what my journey looks like, and this is where I see you growing in the company, and this is the path that I want you to take, right? So that is more of the emotional and the kind of skill building or growth path or the wealth building path that you can show them, right? So the material aspects would be a mix of cash, performance bonus. Like a lot of our employees, we have said that, join us, and then we have always kept a performance bonus or a kind of a target at the end of the year, that if you achieve this is something that we will work with you to kind of get that, right? So make sure that you are invested in them and helping them succeed also to really earn that amount. So one is material, which will be a mix of cash and ESOPs, and the other will be skill building and growth in the company, and how do you kind of help them do different things, grow them out, and make them better and better. So those are the things that you can do.
Okay. Sanat is asking, is it good to set aside a certain amount of equity for liquidity?
Is it, sorry, come again, is it?
Is it good to set aside a certain amount of equity for liquidity?
Okay, so liquidity for me means that you are selling it off and then getting money in turn of that, right? So liquidity in that way is for us, for example, any startup, when it goes through funding processes, right? So when it is either seed investment, angel investment, or you are kind of doing higher institutional rounds like a series or a series B, every time you are actually kind of diluting yourself and bringing in somebody in exchange for equity. Yes, the class of shares that they are given is preferred shares, but overall you are essentially doing exactly what you just asked, that you are going to say that, okay, I'm willing to give away 20% of ownership to somebody in exchange for X amount of money, right? Or I'm X percentage for X amount of money. That is how you kind of, any startup kind of grows when it comes to VC funding or, institutional funding, right? So whether you should always think about a specific amount, I think it changes from round to round. Earlier on, people will want more because you are a much more risky investment for the amount of money that they come in for. As you kind of go further and further, the percentage that you have to part with reduces, and the quantum of money that comes in increases. So that's how the operating principle is.
Okay. So the next question is, giving a co-founder equity is also based on what they bring to the table and how much responsibility and steam they will bring, right?
Yes.
Also, if one founder has an IP, what about royalty and equity sharing? So these are two-part questions.
So if you have an IP, and if you're a founder, that belongs to the company thereafter, right? You cannot say that I am, if you're building the company around that IP, yes, you can potentially kind of get a slightly higher percentage, but the IP will become part of the company thereafter. So think about it from that perspective. The co-founder, just because you have an IP, the co-founder might be the person who is actually helping you take it to market. So don't kind of I would say cringe or undervalue your co-founder just because they don't have an IP. Think about, okay, what does that really mean for you, the IP mean for you, and how are they helping you kind of build a company around it, and then decide upon the equity accordingly. How strong that IP is, what value it has, I can't comment on it, and that, yes, that may have some influence on the equity split, but it shouldn't be that different that one person kind of just because of the IP has the most part and the other person does not. So that's the way I would want to look at it. Shreya, you there?
Sorry. Yeah. So the next question is how to hire a senior talent, especially engineering, tech, or design at the early stage.
the best way is a reference, right? Because otherwise you're risking too much. So if you can find somebody who knows somebody, and that is, at least that's the way we did it. We let our network know that we are hiring for engineers and we are looking for a senior resource. And, we had some people. Also, we were fortunate, like Rishi and I, having been in the industry for 20 years each, we have built a network, we've worked with a lot of teams, we've worked with a lot of engineers, etc. So we were able to kind of go and, pick a few people. But your network is your best bet. Trying to kind of pick somebody up completely unknown is a bit of a risk. So my guidance there would be, find somebody that you can either find a reference for or is recommended to you in some way or the other.
Okay. So the next question is from Anshuman. He says co-founders spoiled the game. Now it broke when it started booming. Now, what's the best way to start up a new venture or save the new venture?
Could you repeat the question, Shreya?
Yeah.
I missed it.
Sorry. Co-founders spoiled the game. Now it broke when it started booming. Now, what's the best way to start up a new venture and save new venture? So, what is that he can avoid?
Okay. So, looks like you've had a bad experience, right? So, yes, disputes are part of the game as well. As much as success is, you will have dissent as well, and things can go south. Completely kind of agree and expect that as well. The only way is, look back at, why did those disagreements really happen? Was it that the set of people that came together, was it the way of working? Was it the skill set that was not complementary? What were the challenges that you actually ran into? And see if you can, so you have to shut down that old company. If you haven't done that, you have to kind of make sure that, and I'm not the best person to take a lawyer and take a CA, advice from them, and make sure that you have shut it down. Your IP, whatever you are, is clean, and it is very well defined who owns what and what are you leaving behind. Then start the fresh company. Try to kind of keep distance from what you in the previous company to what you are doing here. Yes, experiential knowledge is okay, but if you're trying to solve for the same problem and that kind of infringes upon what the previous startup was doing, you will again land yourself in a soup. So you have to delineate yourself and make sure that the new company starts up with a fresh set of capital, starts up with a fresh set of people, and starts up with a fresh problem statement. Otherwise, it can lead to legal challenges. And I would definitely advise getting somebody legal and a CA to kind of advise you on what the process should be.
Okay. The next question is something that we parked during the first section. So this is by Saurabh. I'm launching a tech app where I have the domain expertise. And do you want me to read the question?
No, I remember he said that 15% is with the partners and 85% is with him, and any liquidity that happens into his. Saurabh, I would like to kind of go back to what I was saying earlier, right? Do they really need to be 15% is what you need to give to them? Can they be advisors? Can they be angel investors in some way into your company? Can you kind of think about, why is it 15% and why is it the liquidity happening only in your share? If they are your partners, so to say, even if it's a small share, why is the liquidity only yours? It should not be. I mean, my advice would be, yes, it would be hypothetically 85%, 7.5%, 7.5%. Any investment that comes in is a dilution of this entire 100% and not only the 85% that you own. You are kind of setting yourself up unnecessarily in a corner. So I would not recommend that.
Okay. So should all promoters or co-founders be directors? What should be an ideal number of directors, and how much is the importance of directors?
I don't think I have the right answer to this question, right? I think it has to do with the number of co-founders. We never encountered this situation, so I'm not probably the best person to answer this. Best person to answer this would be maybe a CA or a CS, in terms of, how many directors of the board should be there or not. There are some requirements as far as India law is concerned. There are some other requirements that are there, but I may not be able to comment on it correctly. So I'll refrain from answering incorrect. I'll park.
Okay. So there is another question. So this person says, what if an advisor turns competitor at some point?
Yeah.
What do you do then?
So your advisor agreement that you have with them should specify, what is the time period of non-compete. There has to be a non-disclosure agreement. There has to be no conflict of interest. If that is there, yes, you can't stop anybody from turning competitor. Even an employee can leave you and turn into a competitor, right? So that is why you have NDAs in place. That is why you have agreements in place, so that there is some safeguard. But you can't entirely prevent it. The only thing that you can do is that, yes, in the agreement specify very clearly what is the non-compete clause, what is the confidentiality clause, and till what time that confidentiality kind of applies, and after which you can allow them to kind of step into the arena with you, along with you, or not. So that is the way you kind of prevent some of those things.
Okay. So the next question is, I'm not sure if you have answered this. What are other ways to monetize or reward people, if not equity?
You can set up like performance bonuses, joining bonuses. I think bonus. See, if you have to give cash, cash will be only in 2 or 3 forms. It will either be salary or either be incentives which are linked to milestones or performance in some way. There can be there can be incentives given for, like, for example, the way we did it, Shreya, earlier was when the work from home started, we kind of paid everyone to set up something at their home in terms of a desk or a chair or a UPS, etc. So that is another way of kind of incentivizing them. We take care of their food in the office, at least the evening snack, when it is there, tea, coffee, and also there are some combination of fringe perks, some combination of performance, some combination of salary. Those are the ways of monetizing. One other way could be, for example, especially in the sales team, this works on percentage of sales they make. Like if somebody kind of achieves a certain target number, you kind of say that, yes, a percentage of this will come to you. And that is a great way to motivate them. Set a target that if somebody kind of helps the company achieve this much amount of money, there is a pool that is kind of allocated for that person. So those are other ways to kind of drive motivation or performance within the team.
Okay. So the next question is, my co-founder just joined. He does not want salary, but he wants a percentage of the company. Should I allow that or pay him salary and not give him percentage of the company? What would you advise?
In my view, a co-founder for me is a equity partner. Whether they earn salary or not is irrelevant. They are an equity partner because that is what makes them a co-founder for me. Otherwise, they are an executive in the company, and yes, they may get some portion from the option pool, but they are not a co-founder for me then, right? So that is the way I look at it. Equity, yes, you can safeguard the equity, as I said, by having a vesting schedule to it. By vesting, I mean that, for example, I'll take a very rough example here is, I own 80% of the company as a founder. I don't own 80% of the company on day one. I will own 80% over a period of time. I will earn the 20% of that, 25% of that 80%, which amounts to 20% of the company after 1 year. And every month thereon, I will earn 1/48th of that 80% from that point onwards. So my journey is not that today I started, I own 80%. No. When I start, I own zero. I will earn 20% of the company after year one, 40% of the company after year two, 60% of the company after year three, and then 80% of the company after year four. So that is the vesting schedule that needs to be baked in. And that helps you and your co-founder and your team, work for that amount of time.
Okay. So the next question is for an idea that requires 15 lakhs INR in the ideation to prototype stage, if there is a second person who believes in the idea and is ready to share the investment at 50%, but not work on the idea, how do we treat such people as an investor or as a co-founder? If
That's
so,
an
with how
investor.
much equity?
That's an investor. And uh, you know giving away 50% is too huge, because then you're leaving yourself very little room for any other investor to come in at a later point in time, right? So you will not be able to build wealth that ways, even for the investor who's coming in, because at the end of the day, they also want, when you get more investment, their shares will be worth much, much more, right? So to me, they are an angel investor, because they are putting the cash, but not putting the effort in. By effort means that they are not working on the problem day in and day out. You are. They may be guiding. They may be opening doors for you. They may be providing, time to time guidance on things to do, people, etc. But they are not full time in the role that you are. So treat them as an angel investor. Treat them, and work with them to understand what does it mean for later rounds of investment, if that amount of money kind of goes to them, equity goes to them. You will not get investors at a point in time. So be careful about that.
Okay. So this question has been answered in a different context. How to discuss percentage and equity with the potential co-founder?
Yeah, it's a mix of things. As I said earlier, also, there is no magic formula that I can say that give this much thing so much weightage and give this much thing so much weightage and then arrive on a number. It's how much do you need the person to be part of the organization? What are the skills that they are bringing in? Are they bringing in along with you some cash comp or not? All of these kind of play into the fact, together to kind of decide what the equity will be. What ownership will be decided on what role you are ending up to playing, right? Who is doing what? If it's a small one of the functions that they're owning, then their equity share might be lower compared to you. But if they are, the company is split 50-50 in terms of ownership as well as responsibility between the two of you, then it will be 50-50, that you kind of part with. So it depends on a multiple set of factors.
Okay. So the next one is with the context. I have a 3-year-old company with the co-founder, but we had difference in opinions on how to run the company, and he left. But he still holds an equity of 10% as a silent partner. Most of the business is generated by me rather than the brand of the company. So is it better to dilute his shares for a certain sum of money or shut down the company and start a new one?
That's a hard one, man. And this is where, as I said earlier, a founder's agreement comes into play in terms of, okay, what if somebody leaves midway? And that from what I see, okay, I'll take the happy case here, where the 10% that they own vested, over a period of time. They worked for that 10% whenever they did. And what is remaining is the 90% with you. And just to assuming that a very simple use case at this point of time. In that case, I would recommend just leave it be. Think about it this way, that somebody kind of worked with you, they earned that 10% in some way, and here onwards, whatever is being done, you own, and you kind of yes, if they are willing to sell, if you're bringing in an investor, you can kind of ask them to part with their shares and kind of cash out. but if they own equity, it is their right whether they will decide to do that or not. The path of closing down the company and starting afresh is always available, but unfortunately the India laws are that simple that allow you to just shut a company down and open another one. There is a full, I think, 2 to 3 year process that kind of takes into account of shutting down a company, right? So check with a CA as to what is the process, etc. um, my view, without getting into details or knowing the details, is you might just be better off kind of leaving that 10% aside and see if you can buy out that person at some point in time of that 10%, if they kind of are amenable to that, and move on from there. Shutting down a company and opening a new one is a pain in the Indian ecosystem, unfortunately.
Okay. So Swati wants to know, is equal equity to co-founders better, or someone must have little more than others? What's your opinion?
I would say if you are a co-founder, the closest you can get to equal equity, the better. And because everybody has equal skin in the game, and that is my opinion around it. I'm sure there are instances out there where co-founders come in at a lower equity, but I am looking at it, if I, from my perspective, that when I wanted to kind of shake hands with Rishi and embark on this journey, my thought process was that if I am not invested equally, then am I doing the right thing for the company or not, right? So for me, as a co-founder, having equal stake or near equal stake was very, very important. And that's the way I think about it as well, that co-founders should be people at the same pedestal. Yes, one of them will be the CEO, so slightly higher, but above that, apart from that, everybody should be on an equal pedestal. Doesn't kind of otherwise make them co-founders, in my view.
Okay. We have answered about 33 questions as of now.
And we are at
So
5.
we
We're
have,
at 5 o'clock.
yeah. And thank you, Samit. Thank you for taking
Thanks
time
to
and
everyone.
joining the session.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
see
thanks
still
everyone.
almost 50 participants. Thank you for
Yes.
being patient with us. Hope this was useful. Really appreciate it.